was born at Porbandar in Gujarat, Western India. He grew up to become our beloved Bapu, India's father of the nation. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, the man whom the world remembers as Mahatma Gandhi.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Permanent Mission of India to the UN, a very warm welcome to you as you join us to mark the International Day of Nonviolence, which fittingly is the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, a global icon of peace and nonviolence. We begin today's virtual commemoration with a special message from the President of the 76th United Nations General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Abdullah Shahid.
Your Excellency T.S. Trimurti, Permanent Representative of India to the United Nations, Excellencies, thank you for the opportunity to help commemorate the International Day of Nonviolence. It is not by chance that this day, October 2nd, coincides with Mahatma Gandhi's birthday. In commemorating this day, we also celebrate the legacy of this remarkable man who taught us that there is nothing cowardly about non-violence, that choosing peace even when confronted with injustice, even in our moments of what we think is our justified anger, is the height of bravery. Gandhi based his life on the premise that, in the end, conflict and violence benefit no one. History has vindicated this assessment. Let us never forget that this great institution, the United Nations, was founded from the ashes of a world that was at war with itself. The values of peace enshrined in its charter were compiled from the wisdom of a generation that saw the bitter and destructive path that humanity was on and envisioned something better. A more peaceful future, a more hopeful future. One where our disputes are resolved through multilateralism and dialogue, where our resources and energy are not spent on petty quarrels and hatred, but on uplifting the condition of our species and our planet. Now more than ever, we need to reaffirm our commitment to that vision. In fact, we need to do better, because we have now come to realize that eliminating violence entails much more than just ending armed conflict. My friends, while COVID-19 has been an ordeal for all of us, not all of us have carried the burden equally. The pandemic has been exceptionally difficult for marginalized communities. It has compounded social ills such as poverty, racism, inequality, and exclusion, all of which are contributing to factors to violence. Too many women and girls are suffering through a shadow pandemic of domestic violence and abuse. It is our moral obligation to come together to address these serious issues that make the world less safe. As Gandhi had once affirmed, nothing enduring can be built upon violence. This is precisely the sentiment that guides my presidency of hope. Throughout this session and going forward, I will continue to emphasize the importance of uniting to find peaceful solutions to today's challenges, from conflict to pandemics to the climate crisis to gender-based inequality and violence. I join the voices of those who advocate for immediate ceasefires and an end to hostilities, for putting our faith in diplomacy and multilateralism, for humanitarian assistance to vulnerable communities, for doing better by our fellow species. That is how we will build back better. As Gandhi once said, nonviolence is a power which can be wielded equally by all, provided they have a living faith in the God of love and have therefore equal love for all mankind. Going forward, let us ensure that our younger generations understand the costs of division and strife, of neglecting and mistreating the vulnerable, of failing to come together to do what is right for our planet and its inhabitants. Let us hope that they grow up in a world that has shunned violence in all of its forms behind. And I thank you.
We thank the President of the General Assembly for his important message on this occasion. To introduce the theme of today's commemoration, we now have a message from the Permanent Representative of India to the UN, His Excellency Ambassador T.S. Tirumurthy.
Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to welcome you for a commemoration event of the International Day of Non-Violence in New York. At the outset, allow me to thank the President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Abdullah Shahid, for his video message on this very important occasion. I am also grateful to His Excellency the Secretary General for his message. A couple of years ago, I had the honor of accompanying the Honorable President of India during his visit to Zambia. During this visit, we had the honor of calling on His Excellency the former President of Zambia, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. At the time, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda was well in his 90s. He received us with great warmth in his drawing room. And in one side of the drawing room was a huge portrait of Mahatma Gandhi. It was a photo of a painting done in the 1940s. On the side table was a model of the charkha, or the spinning wheel, which Mahatma Gandhi used to galvanize India by making the charkha a symbol of self-reliance, of non-violence, and finally, of freedom itself. Just as Mahatma Gandhi himself was influenced by great thinkers from abroad, like Henry David Thoreau, Gandhi in turn inspired many others, like Nelson Mandela, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., etc. Gandhiji's 21 years in South Africa shaped his thinking to inspire an entire nation and helped India to overthrow colonialism. In turn, Gandhi's non-violent struggle in India against colonialism inspired a whole continent called Africa to fight against colonialism. Today, we have tried to bring together a few of these voices from around the world, voices of leaders sharing their thoughts on Mahatma Gandhi. At a time when hate, discrimination, terrorism, and conflicts are on the rise, the message of Mahatma Gandhi has never been more relevant. The message of truth and non-violence, satyagraha and ahimsa. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned by Ambassador Tirumurthy, Mahatma Gandhi's life and work and the principles he stood for have inspired global leaders through the decades, finding resonance in freedom struggles and grassroots movements across the globe. We have put together for you some glimpses of renowned personalities speaking about how Gandhian ideals have influenced them and continue to be relevant to the challenges of our times.
Un tragique événement domine nos pensées. Nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui sous l'empire de l'émotion qui vient de se répandre dans le monde à l'annonce de la mort de Gandhi.
The death of Mahatma Gandhi is a catastrophe, not only for India, but for men of goodwill everywhere.
Earlier this month, it was my deep personal honor to visit the Rajghat Memorial in India to pay my respects to one of the world's greatest leaders, Mahatma Gandhi.
Where did you come to Gandhi?
I came to Gandhi in the same setting in theological seminar days. I had heard of Gandhi, but I remembered hearing a message by the president of Howard University, Dr. Mordecai Johnson, who had just returned from India. He spoke in Philadelphia on his trip to India and the whole philosophy of Gandhi and passive nonviolent resistance. Now, I was so deeply moved by the message that I went away and bought several books on the Gandhian, on Gandhi and Gandhian technique. And at that point, I became deeply influenced by Gandhi, never realizing that I would live in a situation where it would be useful and meaningful.
And actually used it actually would apply it in this country.
Gandhi, fondly known as Gandhiji, and Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, known to all of us as Madiba, are those two statesmen and great leaders. Their legacies go far beyond their statures as the founding fathers of our two great independent nations, India and South Africa. What they lived for, what they stood for, and indeed what they fought for continues to resonate with people across the world decades since their departure from this earth. They have influenced generations of leaders, not just in South Africa and India, but worldwide.
On a more personal level, India represents an intersection of two men who've always inspired me. When Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was protesting racial segregation in the United States, he said that his guiding light was Mahatma Gandhi. When Dr. King came to India, he said that being here in Gandhi's land reaffirmed his conviction that in the struggle for justice and human dignity, the most potent weapon of all is nonviolent resistance. And those two great souls are why we can gather here today, Indians and Americans, equal and free.
Gandhiji's vision and philosophy are pillars of the work of the United Nations. Part of his genius lay in his ability to see the interconnectedness and the unity between all things. Gandhi's ideas drive the work of the United Nations for equality, empowerment, and global citizenship every day. I know they also drive the thinking of many global leaders. I commend those who have decided to pay tribute to Gandhi's legacy by marking this anniversary with a project connected to one of the Sustainable Development Goals, a fitting way to honor this most action-oriented leader. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Government of India for supporting the elimination of single-use plastic at the United Nations and the installation of solar panels and a green roof on top of the conference building.
A photograph of Nelson Mandela in his house, in his office. You will see behind him, behind his desk, is a photograph of Mahatma Gandhi. Nelson Mandela has said several times that the man who inspired him more than anyone else during this century was Gandhiji. Gandhiji stood against oppression, against prejudice, and in favor of tolerance and the principle that human beings of all colors and all creeds could and should live together in peace.
One of Gandhi's teachings embodies the UN's spirit, there is no path to peace. Peace is the path. At the same time, it has become a compass for navigating toward peace on the Korean peninsula. For Koreans who are ushering in an era of permanent peace, Gandhi is a great teacher who inspires us with wisdom and courage. Who fought against violence with the power of non-violence to protect themselves and their communities, as well as nature and the dignity of life, are the descendants of the great soul Gandhi. Guaranteeing the ordinary people's right to determine their own destinies and that of their communities constitutes the very starting point of democracy.
Gandhi's ideas had influence far beyond India's shores. His philosophy of non-violent resistance distinguished India from other independence movements of that era. He championed non-violence to the core of his being. Even more remarkably, he could persuade his countrymen to desist from violence, even when they had been persecuted and severely provoked. As he said, "An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind." This was sage advice then, and remains so now. But if we take Gandhi's message to heart, then we must try our best to resolve differences calmly and peacefully, appreciating the views of the other side, and without inflaming passions or hardening attitudes. In so doing, we will build mutual understanding, tolerance, and respect for one another.
Gandhiji, a true patriot, a statesman, and a saint, dedicated his life for humankind. He was a beacon of hope, a light in darkness, and a savior in despair. His brilliant and mesmerizing leadership showed the world that an individual could bring earth-shaking social and political change in a non-violent way. Let me cite a famous quote of Mahatma Gandhi. I quote, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world," unquote.
As a consummate leader, devoted to the welfare of others and to sacrifice in pursuit of the greater good, Mahatma Gandhi, the great soul, remains an inspiration and constant source of motivation. His astute leadership and unflinching determination bear testimony to his vision of a kinder and loving world, and to his singular focus on righting wrongs and addressing injustices. Gandhi's doctrine of nonviolence and sacrifice, together with his vision for a more equitable world, is a source of personal inspiration to my own leadership, and I know that his life's work will continue to inspire new generations to come.
As political leaders, there is much that we can learn from Gandhi as we search for common ground to address the world's pressing problems. For me, there are three aspects of Gandhi's message that carry particular weight: tolerance, equality, and the sanctity of non-violence and peace. These are values that we should always keep in the forefront of our minds, but not just in good times, but especially when faced with difficult choices.
In an assembly shaped by the desire to end global wars, we must remember Gandhi's admonition that poverty is the worst form of violence.
Here, quote Gandhi. Wonderful in their wisdom and in how topical they are. He said that by answering hatred with hatred, the only thing you're doing is help spread hatred.
Permit me to quote from Mahatma Gandhi, who said, as I quote, "While we may never know what results may be achieved by our actions, it is clear that should no action be taken, then it can be reasonably anticipated that there will be no results.
गांधी जी भारतीय थे, लेकिन सिर्फ भारत के नहीं थे। आज ये मंच इसका जीवंत उदाहरण है।
With that, we come to the end of today's commemoration. We thank you all for joining us and leave you with this moving global rendition of Mahatma Gandhi's favorite devotional hymn.
वैष्णव जन तो तेरे कहिए जे पीर पराई जाने रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीर पराई जाने रे।
वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीर पराई
सकल लोक मान सहने वंदे। सकल लोक मान सहने वंदे, निंदा ना करे के नीरे।
निंदा न करे के नीरे। काच काच मन निश्चल राखे, धन धन जननी देनी रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीर पराई जाने रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीर पराई जाने रे।
दुखे उपकारे करे कोई मन अभिमान आने रे। सकल लोकमा सहुने वंदे, निंदा न करे के नीरे। जीवा थकिय सत्य न बोले, भर धन नव ज्वले हाथ रे।
वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीर पराई जाने रे।
वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीर पराई जाने रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे
महामाया व्यापी नहीं जेने, दृढ़ वैराग्य जेनो मन मारे।
रामानमाशु तालिलागी, सकला तीरथ तेरा तार मारे।
वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीर पराई जाने रे। पर दुख उपकार करे तो ये मन अभिमान लाने रे।
वन Galopini Kapatera hitece Kamakrara Nivarare
भाणे नरसायोठेनून दर्शन करता कुळाई गोतीर ठार्या रे
वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही जे